I downgraded to the RTX 4070, and I couldn't be happier. Ever since the 4070 came out, it's been the focal point of contention in the enthusiast PC market. It offers unprecedented performance for a 70 class card while being priced like we owe Nvidia tribute for their generosity of ruling over our vassal state that we call PC gaming. And at only 12 gigabytes of VRAM, if you dare to mention that's good enough, get ready to be immolated in the comments for not understanding that games need a minimum of 16 gigabytes because game devs are now targeting the 16 gigabytes of RAM on the latest consoles as long as we forget the Series S. But I really love this card, and I suspect that you will too if you stop living in the theoretical abstract of tech YouTube's ability to nuance anything into a suboptimal system and instead live in the reality of reality and just choose to enjoy your PCs. And enjoying PCs is the business model of today's video sponsor, Micro Center, which is where Kyler and I went to get this RTX 4070 on launch day. And we actually ended up getting two, and we were able to give one away right after the store opened. The winner was actually able to upgrade from their Kepler era Quadro card, which is a massive leap in performance for them. But Micro Center is the place that you should go if you're considering getting a new GPU, a new system, any new parts that you want in the PC enthusiast sector, because that's exactly what they are there for. And if it's your first time shopping at Micro Center, they actually have a deal specifically for you, because you can use this coupon that we have linked in the video description to get a free 256 gigabyte SSD in store only. They're just gonna give you a free part for being there at the store. And if you're wondering where's the closest Micro Center, well, they have 25 stores located nationwide here in the United States, with the first brand new store in 8 years going to be opening up in Indianapolis this summer of 2023. And they'll have 2 more opening by 2025. But if you check the link in the video description for the Indianapolis store, you can get a free 128 gig flash drive. So long as you click on the link, you sign up, and you show up to the Indianapolis store, you can get that free flash drive as well. They're just giving away a bunch of free stuff. They have over 30,000 items in stock and a vast selection of different products, whether you're a maker and you want a 3D printer, you want to build your own keyboard, or you're looking for components or even pre-builts, because May is desktop month at Micro Center and the desktop deals are featured all month long. And while we're talking about a GPU that you slot into your system, their pre-builts are there for you to be able to pick up your PC with none of the hassle of any type of configuration. They have a ton of great deals like this: $800 off the PowerSpec G439. You get an i7 12700KF, 32 gigs of RAM, a 3070 Ti graphics card with a 1 terabyte SSD, all for $800 off. That's on top of other deals like this one on the Lenovo Legion Tower 5, or this PowerSpec G442, or this G473. And they also have great deals on graphics cards. It was the obvious place for me and Kyler to go to get our 4070, or even to pick up anything from Team Red. And in case you want to spec out your PC yourself, you don't want to go with one of their amazing pre-built deals, they also have a PC builder that you can use online to make sure that all of your parts fit together, and they can offer same-day in-store assembly, so you get all of the ease of that pre-built with all of the customization of you being able to select your parts yourself. Micro Center really does have it all. They're opening up brand new stores, they give you free stuff for being a first-time customer or going to the new Indianapolis store, and I couldn't be happier to have them as a sponsor, because it allows me to do things like go to the 4070 launch, grab one, give one away to one of our subscribers, and that all happens because of great companies like Micro Center. So check them out at the link in the video description. Check out their pre-builds, check out the Indianapolis store, new first-time customer coupon, and anything else that they got that might be piquing your wallet's interest. Big thanks again to Micro Center for sponsoring today's video. Getting back to the 4070, I think part of the conversation that we are forgetting when it comes to these 70 class cards, which are costing $599, is that this is not the first time that Nvidia did this. This actually is the same price as the RTX 2070, because a lot of people don't remember that Nvidia actually had 2 different pricing tiers for their 2070. For these third-party cards, they cost $499, but then for the first-party Founders Edition, they were $599. Nvidia's already been trying to charge us $599 for 70 class cards for quite some time. That doesn't make it better, but it does indicate that there has been some precedence, and we shouldn't really have sticker shock surrounding this, especially when you consider the fact that the 3070 never actually sold for $499. Yes, you could in some instances find it at that MSRP, but for the most part, people were paying well north of $1,000 for that 70 class card. That is what the open market was determining was the street price of that GPU. And it's actually only within the last few weeks since the 4070 launch that we are seeing that 3070s are finally going below MSRP. So the real reality is that we can complain about the price of these cards and we can choose not to buy these, but Nvidia and AMD have seen 2 to 3 years of evidence that we will continuously buy these cards at this price, and a lot of the complaining might just be us running our mouth. But at this $599 price point, the 6950 XT is being touted as the solid replacement for the 4070. It comes in at roughly the same price. You get The Last of Us Part 1 for free for right now, and it has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so Nvidia. But I think they're two different cards for two different situations. And let's also not forget to talk about the fact that AMD hasn't launched a new GPU in over 6 months, and we're still eating off the scraps of the last gen and acting like that's okay and healthy, and somehow AMD's better because they're making sure that we can buy their last generation goods for a healthy price. I mean, especially if you don't even talk about gaming performance. The 4070 has upgraded features. You get AV1, you get DLSS 3, but my favorite thing is you get better power efficiency. And honestly, I think this conversation that we've been having about VRAM isn't really correct, because you're not going to need 16 gigabytes of VRAM for the performance that you're targeting with the 4070. It's just not relevant to high settings 1440p gameplay that you should be targeting with this classic card. And 60 FPS 4K gameplay is still a possibility, and you're not really limited by the 12 gigabytes of VRAM on this card, except in games that are poorly optimized, which we have been getting a lot of lately. So I'm gonna go through the benchmarks showing the 4070 versus the 6950 XT to really indicate that even with the latest games, the 16 gigabytes of VRAM is not an advantage. A faster core is the advantage. The 4070 Ti beats the 4070 even though it has the same amount of VRAM, because it's really not the issue. But besides the VRAM conversation, the thing that gets me excited about the 4070 is that this is a low-powered, souped-up version of the RTX 3080, and that makes it wonderful for so many new scenarios like ITX builds, which if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you know that is a favorite form factor of mine. Whenever I can find an excuse to build in an ITX chassis, I will do that. I did my 7800X 3D review in a mini ITX form factor because I love them that much. And that's exactly what we did for the review of the RTX 4070. It fits perfectly in a case like this fractal ridge, because you're getting RTX 3080 level performance and you're not restricted so much by the thermals or the power output that's causing the rest of the system to heat up. So this is the brand new fractal ridge, and inside we have the ASRock B550 ITX motherboard. And then for the CPU, we're on the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D, which I believe is the best CPU that you can get for gaming right now in terms of value. And you can watch our 7800X 3D review right up there to get more details on that. I've got a crucial 1 terabyte P3 Plus in this system, as well as 16 gigabytes of G.Skill Trident Z Royal RAM, and powering everything is the Silverstone SX700 LPT power supply, which we did not need that much for the RTX 4070, but we absolutely needed it for the 6950 XT. And then cooling that 5800X 3D is the Noctua NH-L12 Ghost S1 edition. Based on the reviews that I read about the Ridge, you can fit the regular edition L12 in this case, but it is very, very tight. If you really want to make sure you have a good fit, the Ghost S1 edition is the way to do it. But I want to discuss a little bit more about that after we talk about the benchmarks. So I made sure to run this thing in 1440p high settings in the latest games, as well as 4K high settings in the latest games, as well as ray tracing both in 1440p and 4K to put it in both the most useful scenario for this card and also put it in the most demanding scenario that you can find in games out there. And what we found was no surprise. At 1440p, the 6950 XT stomps all over the RTX 4070. It comes in anywhere from 5% to 22% faster than the RTX 4070. But one of the things that I made sure to pay very close attention to in all of my benchmarking is how much VRAM were we actually being told was being used by the system. Because that's also one of the conversations that needs to be happening. Even though your system might be reporting that you are using a certain amount of VRAM, some of that is just being reserved and not actively used by the game. Take a look at something like Horizon Zero Dawn at 1440p high. The RTX 4070 used 10.8 gigabytes in this PlayStation 4 game. This is as unoptimized as you could possibly get. And then when we scaled it up to the 6950 XT, it used 13.2 gigabytes at the same resolution and the same settings. And that might make you think you're being VRAM bottlenecked, but the truth is, that's not happening at all. The game is just gobbling all of that VRAM up in reserve and saying, if it's available, I will take it, I will use it if I need it, and I'm not gonna give it back. So the game used 18% more VRAM and only got 15% better performance. But then you can look at other games like Hitman 3, which used nearly 24% more VRAM, but only got 8.5% better performance. Because VRAM is not a direct indication of how well your gaming card is gonna perform. It is part of the equation, but not all of it. And then in some of the latest, most unoptimized games like Jedi Survivor, we used 2.5% more VRAM with the 6950 XT, but got 8.5% better performance. But then in The Last of Us Part 1, we used 31.5% more VRAM on the 6950 XT, but only got less than 11% better performance. The key takeaway from all of this is that these games are unoptimized. Game developers are actually not developing these games in a way that makes sense for PCs to span a whole wide range of systems, and it's really not a super big problem to have 12 gigabytes at 1440p, which is where I believe the RTX 4070 really shines. For the most part, you're at 70 to 150 FPS in the latest AAA titles. But then if you scale it up to 4K, the 4070 can still keep pace, go about 60 FPS, which is where a lot of people are gonna have a 4K display at. And what we find here is that because we're not as CPU bottlenecked, which I want to discuss in a second, the 6950 XT actually goes a little bit higher, up to 28% faster than the 4070 in some scenarios. And then for the most part, used about 22% more VRAM in the games. And then if we take a look at ray tracing in 1440p, I tested out 5 different games that support ray tracing. And what we found is that the 4070 actually beats the 6950 XT in a lot of games when you turn ray tracing on, thanks to the fact that a lot of these games have been optimized for NVIDIA's RT cores, which means that if you're trying to get the most pretty realistic looking lighting out of a video game, the 4070 is gonna be a better option than the 6950 XT. But even though the 4070 was faster, it used between 16 and 40% more VRAM. In a game like Hitman 3, 40% more VRAM, but the 6950 XT was 27% slower than the 4070. So you're using more resources to get less out of it. And it's a very similar scenario in 4K. The 4070 still beats the 6950 XT in a lot of the different games. In The Witcher 3, F1 2022, and Jedi Survivor, the 6950 XT finally kept pace, but again, used a ton more VRAM simply because it was available. And this is one of the reasons why when you hear reports of an RTX 3070 that got upgraded from 8 gigabytes of VRAM to 16 gigabytes of VRAM, the only game they showed off in that video was Resident Evil 4, where the average FPS didn't go up, but the 0.1% and 1% lows were actually increased, which means that the game was smoother and more playable. However, that is one game out of a bunch of other examples, and the fact that that's the only one they tested seems to indicate that there is not currently a huge bottleneck when it comes to VRAM in most games. At 12 gigabytes of VRAM with the 4070, you're going to be fine. I want to drill that home because most people, I think, are getting worked up over the amount. At the resolution and the settings and the frame rate that you're targeting, the 4070 is going to be fine with 12 gigabytes of VRAM. Game devs might have more to work with the latest consoles, but the Series S also has to be optimized for in a bunch of these different games, and that only has 8 gigabytes of shared RAM, which means they have to find a way to actually utilize using less VRAM across the entire system, which should apply when they bring it across to the PC port. It hasn't, because they're not doing good PC ports lately, but I just want to communicate. The 4070 is good at what it does, and if it was faster, it would need more VRAM, but where it ends up at, it doesn't actually need it. But one of the things I didn't talk about with all of those benchmarks is the reason why I'm so excited to get rid of my 6950 XT in this system, and that is because the 4070, number one, is smaller, number two, is way quieter than the 6950 XT in a scenario like this, and number three, draws significantly less power. So on average, while gaming, this system with the 5800X 3D and the RTX 4070 drew anywhere from 315 to 330 watts. Meanwhile, the 6950 XT drew between 515 and 530 watts, which, number one, in the total cost of ownership of a device, if you're gaming for 3 hours a day, that's $26 a year at 12 cents per kilowatt hour. It's $65 a year if you're living in California with 30 cents per kilowatt hour, or that number increases the more that you game. But in this instance, you're using 60+% more power on the 6950 XT to only get between 15 and 20% better gaming performance. And that doesn't matter to a whole host of people, but it does matter in scenarios where you're either thermally constrained, you're size constrained, or you just want to make sure that you're running as efficiently as possible. The fact that NVIDIA can give us a card that can put out these frame rate numbers while drawing less than 350 watts from the wall with an entire system is truly remarkable and makes something like the Fractal Ridge actually possible. Because what I found in my testing is that the 5800X 3D could not possibly be cooled by that Ghost S1 cooler. We were thermal throttling in a lot of scenarios, getting up to 90 to 91 degrees Celsius and dropping down to 4.1 gigahertz, 4 gigahertz on the CPU core. Which means, ideally, I need to be running a slightly slower CPU in this system, which actually gives a way better benefit to something like the 4070. Because the 6950 XT, honestly, for this type of system, is too hot, too loud, and too fast, because if we have to lower the CPU to something that can actually be cooled by that Ghost S1, we are going to be way more CPU bottlenecked and wasting the potential of the 6950 XT, whereas the 4070 will slot in very nicely. And especially because the hotspot temperatures on the 6950 XT were northwards of 90 to 95 degrees Celsius at some points, we're dumping a lot more heat into this total system and making it so that the CPU cooler has to work harder to keep that 5800X 3D cool. The 4070 honestly brings a lot to the table. AV1 encoding, DLSS 3, I didn't test any frame generation because that's a separate conversation altogether, but the amount of performance that you get for the size, for the power draw, and the opportunities it gives you to put it into systems like this to make truly console-sized gaming PCs that can put the actual consoles to shame is amazing. This card is neat. It is not for everybody. At $599, I would still argue that it costs too much. I would like to see it drop down by another $100 to be at $499, but I don't think that you can write it off simply because the 6950 XT was discounted over a year past its launch, and AMD still refuses to give us any sort of real competitor for the 4070, and all they've delivered within 6 months is something that is $750 plus. I think who we have to blame for a $599 4070 is NVIDIA and ourselves and AMD. It's the whole ecosystem that is working together to create a card like this, which does deserve to exist. Ideally, at a slightly lower price point, but the 4070 is a very exciting card. I like it, and I like our video sponsor, Micro Center, for allowing me to take road trips on over there to actually be able to get these cards and the CPUs that I've been able to pick up on launch day. You guys should check them out at the link in the video description. Don't forget that we are giving away a PC over on our Twitch channel right now if you want to come check that out. It's this Fractal North build with the RTX 3070 Noctua edition. It's got a 13600K Noctua coolers. It's a gorgeous looking system. Come watch us over on Twitch in case you want to participate in that. Let me know your thoughts on the 4070 down below, and I'll see you in the next video.